is Chantal Hockheimer, and I'm a licensed broker with AspirePeak Properties. We're back again with our vetted vendor webcast. We are introducing you to those amazing vendors in all categories that are related to services that you may need for your rental properties. The topic today is restoration services. With how cold the weather has been lately in Calgary and Medicine Hat, pipe bursts are a reality, and you're going to want a great vendor that'll be quick to respond and knowledgeable on what to do next in case you do run into that scenario. Here to talk to you today about restoration services is Kai, and I'm sorry, I'm going to say your last name wrong now again, Hockhausen.
Hey, you got it.
You got it? Okay, with ServPro Calgary. Kai, welcome, and thank you for joining us, and last name, we're good.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure they say it differently in the old country, but it's good enough for us.
So welcome. I'm glad that we got that sorted. So Kai, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in restoration?
Yeah, totally. I've been with ServPro Calgary for about, I guess, over a year and a quarter, and I kind of fell into restoration. I actually come from hospitality background, but I've been working in marketing and sales for about 15, 20 years, and yeah, it's been a kind of a cool stop in the journey, and I'm sort of bringing some of our kind of the previous hospitality mindset to kind of our service model here at ServPro. I guess how I kind of fell in, life is all about referrals, and our business and job search is not that different. So I was actually referred here by I guess a colleague of mine, and started in November 2020. I almost said 2021 there, but getting ahead of myself. And and I kind of never really looked back. It's been kind of a fun industry to get involved in, and of course, looking forward to some better times now that visiting is opening up again, sort of in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. Fingers crossed, like knock on wood.
Right, yeah, fingers crossed, no restrictions.
Yeah, as far as ServPro Calgary goes, we've been officially in operation since 2013. In Calgary area, and we service anywhere in southern Alberta, and then we also do have an operation in northern Alberta as well, and so they would handle anything out of Edmonton office. So we're part of the biggest cleaning network in North America. So ServPro has over 1,900 franchises North America wide. And we have probably a much smaller footprint in Canada. We have 16 locations across the country. But yeah, so we have roots in Calgary since kind of the late 60s, and there's been sort of a number of iterations of ServPro, but our current office and operation has been open since 2013.
Amazing. No, I love it. You say you're not a large footprint in Canada, but 16 offices is still quite a bit. You're servicing Southern Alberta, which we do the same thing. So, your services should be similar per office, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And one of the really interesting things, and we'll kind of get into, I suppose, probably a little later, but, as you know, restoration is so regulated that, the biggest difference between kind of us and some of our competitors is our fans are green. our vans are green and our fans are green, and we really put a lot of pride into our kind of customer service and the way we approach our customer experience. But yeah, I mean, realistically, when you need an emergency taken care of, well, hopefully you call us, but it's one really nice thing about working in a regulated industry is that generally that the job's going to be done right, because otherwise there's someone on our case. And but I mean, the biggest thing is we're making sure that everything's getting. We're disrupting people's lives, so we want to make sure that everything goes back to normal. And we actually have a saying at ServPro that we make like it never even happened happen, right? And so anytime we're called out, we want to make sure that we can get everyone's house or commercial operation back to normal as quickly as possible.
Yes.
With minimal interruption, of course.
So kind of, I guess, to expand on that, because you touched on it a little bit, ServPro is regulated, the industry is regulated. So there's certain specifications you guys need to follow in case of losses. But what services, like why ServPro? What services do you guys offer for restoration?
Yeah, so our specialties are, fire and flood restoration are the biggest ones. So anytime there's a flood of any magnitude, really, anything from a small toilet overflow that's contained within the bathroom to something that happens on the 30th floor of a condo building that goes all the way down to the lobby. That's why we're here. But we don't just do water. We do fire cleanup. But I mean, hopefully edit this a little bit. But I mean, we do anything from mold remediation to asbestos abatements to biohazard cleanups, sewer backups. Even graffiti removal and things that you just kind of don't really necessarily think about. But we don't want things that are abnormal to just become normal, right? So getting it back to that original state is kind of always the goal, and is always the key. To making sure that, like I said, like you go back to normal and make it like it never even happened.
So that's great. So fire, flood, mold remediation, as well as asbestos, you said a little bit, you guys touch on, and then biohazard, which, I mean, on the rental property side, most time you're going to really run it as biohazard. It's unfortunate if you have a tenant that passes away and you don't know right away.
Yeah, I mean, we would even consider things in biohazard, things like, let's say your tenant has, there's drugs in the building or something like that, right? And so we would bring in one of our partner companies to come do the drug testing, make sure that it's safe for us actually to be in there. And then we'd come in kind of the full biohazard suit and, like those spacemen that you kind of see and wandering around the respirators. And, but yeah, so we have a lot of specialty training. We even have a guy has almost 40 years of experience in mold remediation, and he's level 3 master. He's one of the guys trained to train the trainers, kind of thing. So we have kind of a wealth of knowledge here, and then of course all of our crews are trained in different ways as well. Anything from fall arrest to little basic things like water tickets, right? So. One thing that you could always be guaranteed with our company is that we would always send the best guy to the job for whatever that task is. So we have couple of our project managers, their specialty, for example, would be those drug cleaning or biohazard cleaning, and I mean, it doesn't have to be something that's really tragic. It could be even something like, hey, I was having a party and someone got too drunk and puked everywhere, right? And not that we're not necessarily the first person to think about that, but we're always probably the best trained to deal with situations like that. And of course, in party situations is a little different than kind of regular everyday life, right? And I kind of mentioned earlier, like we have a sprinkler head blow versus sewer backup. It's a very different procedure, and we're dealing with different. Different hazards, I suppose, right? Depending on the category of water, depending on, how many suites it would be affected, how much of the house is affected. And then we even get into contingencies like, is the building a metal stud building versus a wood stud building? Is it concrete floors versus plywood floors and things like that? So a lot of intricacies that I leave to the pros.
But the key is you have the pros for those specific situations, so that we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so we kind of joke a little bit because we know, of course, that anytime we're in a property, it's somebody's biggest, most valuable asset, whether they're renting or whether they own it. All of this person's material goods are stored in this place. So. I really like to put myself in the shoes of our clients and make sure that, how would I want to be treated if this happened in my house, right? And so respect is a big thing. Open communication is a big thing, kind of on the service side. But more than anything, we want to make sure that you know that you can just kind of, have a cup of tea, put your feet up, and we'll take care of the rest.
Love it. Love it. So I guess here's a maybe fun or interesting question. What are some of the biggest losses you've seen?
Some of the biggest losses. So some of the biggest losses are things that are very innocent. I remember working with a hotel, I guess kind of fairly recently, but ends up being sort of a $500,000 $1 million loss because there's a hotel guest left the window open when it was cold, went for dinner and came back, and 6 floors were filled with water because a sprinkler head blew. Right. And it's something that's very, you almost think of it as something that's benign, and I just needed some fresh air in the room, and it's minus 25 out, and we kind of don't always necessarily think about what that impact can have. In this particular instance, the pipe that blew was actually the plumbing that was for the bathroom, which, if you can imagine a hotel room, there was an entire room with 2 beds, kind of space anyway, and then the heat was on, so you really don't think about it, and ended up filling that entire suite with water, and went down 6 floors, and 8 units kind of around the other side, and then the biggest thing is that it went into the elevator pits as well. So, the elevators are not operational for a while. And so something that's really small and seemingly very innocent can really escalate. But, and then we've even had situations like in the summer when there's a lot of hail or big water, kind of a big, we call them cat situations where, everyone in the city is running off their feet. And we have a courtyard that has a nice little garden, little shared area, and flows into all the main floor units because there's just so much volume of water that's falling at one small period of time. Right. And so you get kind of, and then all of a sudden we're dealing in different category water because now it's mixed in with dirt, and who knows what else is outside. So kind of fecal matter. And so it's anything that's, and we don't really hope that ever happens to anyone. Like, no one ever wants to call their restoration company, but of course that's why we're here. And, we always got the bright eyes, bushy tail, because we're always here to help.
So would you say that water is probably the biggest indicator for some of your major losses, or is it kind of par and par with fire?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, a lot of why we're called in, even in fire situations, is because of water, right? Because there's a fire, and so either the firefighters have to come in and put out the fire, or the automatic sprinkler system in a building would be tripped, and then there's a nice little shower on that floor. So cleanup wise, the procedure looks fairly similar, right? Extract the water, and then dry out as much as we can.
Okay. So yeah, water, not good. So I guess what are some tips that you can provide our landlords for preventing losses like that happening? If it does, for tenant leaves a window open like the hotel, or fire starts. What are some quick prevention methods so they don't get massive?
So I guess it would really depend on the season. As a landlord, we want to make sure that, and it seems kind of funny, but even things like making sure the windows are closed, and that's any time of year. That can be, we had the big hail and rainstorms in early July, and we're still finishing projects from that period, right? And but I guess the biggest thing is kind of keeping a pulse on your house, and that can be whether you're renting, whether you're a landlord, whether you're a homeowner, whether you're just even kind of at a vacation property or something like that, right? It is super important to just kind of know what might go wrong. We have programs here. We call it emergency ready profile, and it's something that we set up with a lot of our. I don't want to even say larger, but a lot of our multi-tenant spaces. or commercial spaces as well, so that when we do get a call from the property operator or property manager, we know exactly where to park. We know where to, where we know how to get into the building. And so we kind of lay everything out, and, where's the water shutoffs, and where are the, where's the sprinkler system set up? Is there, for example, glycol in the system? Do you have a backup generator? Like all these things, and we lay it all out. And then when our crews are on the way, that saves so much time, because then we don't have to say, oh, hey, we just got to site. Where do we park? Right? Or we just got to site. How do we get into the building? Who do we talk to? And right, because we'd have all that information already before they even leave the shop here with the equipment. So that's one sort of more, I suppose, premeditated planning type activity we can help set up. But really the biggest thing, and this goes for whether you hire us or hire a different company, it is really important to hire professional services for this kind of thing. Like it seems really easy. I had a toilet backup, and we had, now it's gone from my third floor into the main floor of the house. And you never really know what's going on behind the walls. And that's why it's important to hire a company like ours. If you can hire us. But I say that tongue in cheek, of course. But one of the biggest things is that by hiring a company like ours, it really mitigates a lot of the opportunity to have extra damage created, right? If you take care of a little loss by yourself, it's probably going to be fine. But we can come in with some moisture meters, and we can come in with, even infrared cameras, and really help figure out not only what the source is, but, maybe there's something a little more ongoing. And then ultimately we want to make sure that any walls that are wet, you really want to avoid that opportunity for any bacterial growth. Right. So things like mold, fungus, that kind of thing, that can happen all behind, I don't want to say behind the scenes, but definitely behind the scenes, like behind the walls. Right. And so it's not necessarily what you can see that's dangerous. It's what you can't see. And that's especially true in situations where, sewer backup, or if you have a different, like a higher category of water. So if it's running out of your kitchen sink tap onto the floor, probably okay. But, if there's any already existing mold spores or something like that behind the walls, all they need is moisture and heat, and that allows them to flourish. So,
no, I love that. Know where everything is. If you have vendors, be prepared to be able to tell them where to park. So that info sheet you're talking about, is that just kind of something ServPro gives to their clients beforehand? Or is it something that you can pass on to me that I can kind of branch off and show people what they should be looking for in those scenarios?
Yeah, totally. So our specifically our ServPro one is the website's simple. It's ready.servpro.com. But yeah, I mean, it's a document that we use in the case of emergency, but it's actually equally for you. And so let's say you change utility providers. That's something you'd want to note. And then that way we have real life kind of live information on how that happens. So again, when we're on the way to site, okay, we know we need to look for, Bill, or we need to look for, Chantal is the main contact for this building, or whatever, right? And so anything that we can do to save time is better, because the longer the water's sitting around, especially stagnant or not, we want to make sure we can get that off the floor and out of the walls as quickly as possible.
And what's the website again? Just one more time.
It's ready.servpro.com.
ready.servpro.com. Okay.
Yeah.
I think we've got it in there enough times now.
But yeah, so basically I would help set up, or me or someone like me would help set up that initial profile. We'd kind of do a quick walkthrough of the building. And again, this is more practical for sort of multi-unit buildings or multifamily buildings or commercial buildings. And we do even have a much smaller home version, where we would even we provide nice little tag, and it shows water shut off, gas shut off, as well as our kind of emergency contact numbers. A nice little template thing. And anyone who's interested in that, you can just reach out at homeready at servpro.com. But or so servprocalgary.com, I should say.
Say the whole thing again. Just
homeready at servprocalgary.com.
Okay, there we go. Awesome. So I guess talking about, remediation and stuff like that, what are some key factors that you guys do for water, sewer backup, or even mold remediation? Like, I know there can be different steps, but what can you tell us?
Yeah, totally. For fire and water, a couple of the big things is that anything that's wet would generally take 2 to 5 days to dry. I would say 90+% is dry in kind of 3 days. So it is a minor kind of inconvenience. You got the fans running and the dehumidifiers running. And so from just the straight restoration side, or kind of that emergency mitigation side, they are loud. Like, the equipment is loud. We totally appreciate how it's making a lot of noise in someone's residence or in their office. It is pretty important, though, to make sure that equipment stays on. Kind of goes without saying, but the longer it runs, the better your walls are going to dry out, and ultimately it's to prevent the need for kind of some mass demolition. And right, I know for example, with some water events, we can kind of get away just drying it. So we'll cut some holes in the baseboard, like behind where the baseboards would normally sit, kind of remove any wet insulation, right? Any wet fiberglass insulation, and we'll try to dry it out as best we can. Quite often we'll have to cut it, say 2 feet, and that's depending on the category of water. So if it's mixed in, for example, with sewage, or mixed in with different biohazard type things, that's something that we would always make sure that health and safety is the most important priority. So I mean, that extends to any work site we're on as well. So if we're so anyway, sorry, I kind of rambled there a little bit, but we'll always do our best to kind of minimize the number of cuts we need to make. But sometimes it's sort of inevitable. So I kind of referred to it before, but with sewage, for example, we have to immediately cut that out, because there's significant health danger for the future. And again, it's not necessarily that immediate today, but it's something that we want to make sure that we're avoiding some kind of microbial growth kind of down the road. And so that's kind of that longer term health and safety of the work site, or of, I should say, the residents.
Yeah. So there's probably a lot more you're cutting out if it's sewer backup kind of thing versus water, right? Because water you can dry.
Yeah, absolutely.
But sewer is less.
Yeah, and that's all dictated by our industry standards, and so that's the IICRC. And so everyone here who's in the field is trained by those same standards. And that should be, in theory, the same between like us and any of our certified kind of accredited competitors as well.
Awesome. So then what happens if, we're not catching the water behind the walls, and all of a sudden we start seeing mold? What kind of remediation does that involve?
Yeah, so for us, the first step would be we'd always bring in a hygienist. And so they would test the air quality. They also look at the actual growth, if there is any. And that's because, as I said earlier, it's all about the safety and health of, well, us and of course our clients as well. So typically in a mold situation, we'd have to cut out any affected material. So whether that's drywall or insulation, or really any material. And so we'll go as far as we can to make sure that we kind of encapsulate everything. Generally, like I said, we would cut that out, and then we would bring in later the hygienist back to kind of do an afterwards check as well. And then we'd go usually straight ahead into rebuilding it. So kind of as our slogan said, like it never even happened. So we put it back together as best we can, and make it as if it never did happen. But I mean, there's kind of that, black box that starting at point A and goes into this thing and our guys do their job and then B, it's like, and back to normal.
And how long, so just for our viewers out there, how long does it take for water to turn into mold if it's not dried properly?
In the right conditions, I mean, we can see mold kind of within a week.
Okay.
But yeah, so the biggest ways that we prevent that is, of course, air circulation is the biggest one. And then proper training is kind of the other big one, right? If you kind of go in there and, I mean, anyone could do I almost said half-ass. I guess I'm just going to say it because now, but anyway, anyone can kind of go in and kind of look at things kind of on a very high level and say, yeah, that looks like mold, I'll cut that out. Doesn't mean they're necessarily getting everything they need to. And maybe, if there's a slow leak into that area, I know recently we were actually just in a job site where we found pre-existing mold. And so, it wasn't part of the original scope, but of course the property owner wanted to take care of it altogether. So, and then this is especially true when we're dealing in, in food services or kind of in any public retail or, well, I mean, even any household really, but we do often see some smaller clients, and I want to say on the residential side, but that's not universally true. But when you're paying out of pocket versus out of insurance, we very much appreciate, because we are homeowners too, very much appreciate that we want to keep the costs lower, but without taking any shortcuts, right? Because shortcuts is the way that people get sick or get hurt. And so by that same way of thinking, we want to make sure that we're taking care of everything properly, but again, in a way that suits everyone's budget.
Yeah, so I kind of touched a little bit on that, like very briefly there, about paying out of pocket for mold, because a lot of insurance companies won't cover mold once it's happened. So again, check your policies. You have to review on what that coverage is, because it can be, a little bit, especially if it's been there for a while and there's quite the extensive remediation to do to redo that. And just for the quick example to our viewers out there, I had a case a couple years ago. Tenant not nailed in, but put a large mirror in her dining room wall, which was fine. We allowed them to hook it in, but she accidentally went too far and nicked the plumbing stack in the drywall. Because it was such a tiny nick, it dripped. No one noticed it until it started creating mold. So homeowner, tenant, neither policy covered mold. So it's a big thing to watch for and make sure you're paying attention to your properties, like Kai said. Sorry, I kind of jumped in there.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, no, I was done my point. That's a really good point. And I know sort of earlier we were talking about difference between kind of insurance claims versus paying out of pocket. I know a lot of the cases kind of they involve sort of who's at fault. In a single family home, of course, it's either the fault of the property or it's the fault of the property tenant or resident. So that's kind of a little more cut and dry.
Yes.
No restoration, pun intended. But yeah, and then so in a lot of multifamily, what we do see is that, I guess taking a kind of a half a step back, is that one thing that we're very aware of, especially kind of in this 2021, 22, a lot of companies' insurance premiums have gone up. This is especially true in condo corps. I know my building that I live in specifically, condo insurance went up 18% last year. And so when we look at deductibles, because of course the condo board is tasked with always finding kind of a more budget friendly alternative. And so they've in order to get lower premiums, of course they have higher deductibles. And so we're running into a lot of condo buildings that have $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 deductibles. And if that's not covered by your renter's insurance, I mean, you're in, that can be pretty serious. So, I mean, as a renter, it's always important, and I'm sure you've done a podcast on something like this, but it's always important to have that tenant insurance or that homeowner's insurance, no matter what, because again, it kind of comes down to fault. And not necessarily that I am involved, like in my marketing position, that I'm involved in a lot of insurance claim details. But I do know that it is often the insurance company's mandate to not support larger losses than necessary. So quite often, well, and I guess the best way you can help out your condo or your landlord is that you have your own insurance, right? So
Yes.
And I know a lot of our clients too, especially on the residential side, that's mandatory. But
yes.
anyway, I kind of just rambled there a bit, but yeah, I mean, so it's yeah, I mean, the more things you can do to prevent having a larger loss, the better for everybody.
Awesome. Well, Kai, thank you. I think that's everything I had for you. Is there anything else you want to just kind of drop in there, either about water, mold, or sewer, or fire, even anything?
Yeah, on the technical side, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions anytime. But yeah, no, I appreciate taking some time to visit, and it's kind of cool to share some of my knowledge, and of course our project managers are all even better versed in all the technical details than I am. So anytime you need any services like we discussed, then please think of us. Yes,
and I will put Kai's information and ServPro's information in the post below. So if you do need restoration services, you can contact him to get that scheduled. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned.